right, guys, we now welcome on a very special guest. He was the face and voice that brought you through every pregame, intermission, and postgame show for the past couple years. A local Emmy winner for his outstanding hosting and TV personality skills. Host of the new podcast, the Capitol Building Podcast. Guys, the incredibly talented Rob Carlin. Rob, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Wow, that was a hell of a lead-in, man. That was fantastic. Can you follow me around?
Right, we got to pump tires around here. We got to do it.
Yeah, man. As you kept saying it, I was like, "Damn, who's joining us? This guy sounds good."
And then you're like, "Damn, look at me. How about that?"
How about that?
So, Rob, good to have you. How's I guess how's quarantine and everything been treating you? I mean, we got a little bit back to normal, a little bit it seemed like, but now that we're getting into the winter, it looks like we're bunkering back down here.
Yeah, getting ready to bunker down too. I have a bad feeling about how this winter is going to go. It's funny and not funny, but people come up to me since I lost the job, and they're like, "Well, I hope you're at least spending a lot of time with your family." I'm like, "It's all I've been doing since March."
I'd prefer not to at this point.
Yeah, right. Like a terrible time for that. But we're good. We're getting ready for Thanksgiving. My in-laws usually come. They're from Michigan, and my sister-in-law was funny because my in-laws wanted to come. We wanted them to come. They're awesome. They're super fun, and neither one of us would say it's a bad idea. And finally, my sister-in-law was like, "You guys are playing this weird game of COVID chicken. Just say you're not going." And finally, we're like, yeah, it's really not safe. Don't drive through Ohio and Pennsylvania to get here. So it's just going to be the immediate family, and we'll make the best of it like everyone else.
Love it. So let's start with the new podcast here. I mean, always loved you on Capitals Talk. In my opinion, was always the second best podcast because obviously we're a little biased here. But so you launched a new one, the Capitol Building Podcast. Handful of episodes in, some good listens too. So kind of talk about that a bit. Kind of the basis of the show, what the listeners can expect. I mean, is it all caps or do you mix in some other stuff? What do you got going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically all caps, but I'll bring in, other beat reporters to cover other teams. It's all going to be, around hockey and around what affects the Caps. I mean, obviously, had Ian McIntyre from Vancouver to talk about Holtby signing there, and now it's Biggs and Holtz, and Nate Schmidt gets traded there. So, like, all of a sudden, they became the Caps of the Pacific Northwest, and so it's going to be a lot of what you heard on the Capitals Talk podcast, just good hockey talk. After I lost the gig, I was kind of like, what do I do now? Even just to fill a void. And, you guys, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Right now, podcast is kind of a side hustle until you make it big. And so I got in with this group, Blue Wire Podcast, which is a really exciting up and coming company. Actually was founded by a kid. He's a man, but compared to me, he's a kid from Northern Virginia who was a Caps fan and went out to the Bay Area to cover the Warriors and the Niners on radio, and was like, well, I can't pay my bills working in radio. So we started this podcast company, and he's built a nice little machine they've got going there. So I'm in with them, and we'll just continue the Caps talk as long as people will keep listening. I'll keep putting it out there.
Love it. So one of your previous episodes, you had Bruce Garriock on. You guys talked a bit about the NHL, the NHLPA. There's been a ton of disagreements. Even ownerships from different teams are up and down and this, that, and the other. And you guys talked about kind of how this could all put the season in jeopardy. I mean, if it really does come down to it, do we see an NHL or the owners or the PA stoop so low over these disagreements that they just delay the season even more, potentially even can it? Because, I mean, we're looking at the NBA here has come out with their saying we're starting December 22nd. We're running down this path. We're doing this, and this, and all is good. But we're still kind of very shaky here in terms of getting on the ice.
I said it in the podcast. If there is a league that would shoot itself in the foot and do something so stupid, it would be the NHL to do something like this because they can't afford it. The NBA still has superstars and personalities, and you're just if LeBron's playing, there's gonna be an audience. The NHL doesn't have that in the States because Connor McDavid, A, is on the West Coast, B, plays in Edmonton, and C, most of America doesn't even really know who he is. So, and they don't, Ovi and Sid have had their run for a long time. I don't know that it still has that juice even. So it would be really ill-advised. I understand that owners can lose millions and millions of dollars, will lose, have lost millions and millions of dollars, but this league cannot afford They've had too many lockouts and too many strikes. They're still a niche sport in this country, so they have to get it done. They will get it done. And Bruce, spelled it out on the podcast. And it really, when he said it, I was like, Jesus, there's no time for this. I mean, it really had to be done last week to get players in to Canada, quarantine for 2 weeks, to start a training camp to be ready for January 1, right? That was their big thing, is January 1, which I think all of us hockey fans would love for it to, it would be ideal, is to start on January 1 and continue to own that day. I just don't think it can happen now. So, and that's like producing a show. You're just back timing, right? Like we got to be out by we got to be ready to go by January 1. The math isn't really equating anymore. So I think they'll start somewhere in mid to late January and play a 48 to 56 game schedule, somewhere in that ballpark. And then, leave a week or so open for any cancellations. I think they've learned from baseball and they've learned from the NFL that you're going to and certainly from college football now, that you're going to have to adapt and be ready for cancellations, and especially in an indoor arena in the dead of winter. So I think they're just they probably have 73 different plans ready to go. And eventually, as soon as they can work out the money, because this is like the mafia in politics, follow the money. They're asking the players to give more, but they'll work it all out and get a product on the ice at some point.
Yeah. Well, when you started that answer, you said the only league that would shoot themselves in the foot like this is the NHL. I would argue that the MLB could do that as well. They've shot themselves in the foot many, many times. But
they're always there. I mean, like they played through there when everyone was ripping them at the beginning, when games were being canceled, and there was that stretch where, one team had played 12 games and one team had played 2. And everyone was like, what are we even doing here? I was like, dude, we're figuring it out. Like, that's all anyone could do. Yes, Major League Baseball will find ways to shoot itself in the foot for sure. But they did the right thing, and they just said, we're starting and we're going to figure this out until we get a champion. Much like hockey did last year. I think hockey just can't flirt with baseball. Through all its warts, is still baseball, man. There's still a romantic part of baseball, and hockey doesn't have that, not in the US anyway.
The other parallel between the two is you bring up the McDavid part, like how he plays in Edmonton, he plays in Canada. They just don't market him well enough. MLB does the same thing with Mike Trout. It's unreal. It's like he's the best player in the MLB, but he's playing on the Angels. He's not playing like, well, I mean, the Angels have a pretty good market, obviously, but it's
but he's lost on the West Coast. Yeah, you're right. He's lost late at night on a bad team that's insignificant. The difference is, again, baseball is baseball. So you're still going to see that majestic swing, right? It's still going to come all over. Connor McDavid, other than those handful of goals that are going to, buzz Twitter, it's just not going to penetrate the mainstream sports stratosphere in the States. I mean, Ben, you're in Canada. I remember the first time I went to Canada, I was working with the Islanders broadcast at that point for MSG Network. And I went to Canada. Obviously, everyone knows hockey is everything. I went there and I remember watching TSN one night, and I was like, they're doing like 3 minutes of highlights off the top of this Canucks game. Like, I can't believe how much attention it was a 3-minute highlight, a package from a reporter, more sound. I was like, this is one game in November. Like, what? I can't believe how much attention is shown to every single game in Canada. And it ain't that in the States. And I mean, honestly, you can't name 3 guys that would really make people turn their heads and say, ooh, I got to watch that in the US. And that's a problem.
Yeah. Right. So you kind of answered this question a little bit before, but what is your official prediction of what will happen in the 2020-2021 season?
What I said, about 48 to 56 games, somewhere in that run. And they will look, I love the playoffs. I thought the playoffs were great. It was fantastic drama. I thought they did an amazing job. And the main director for NBC actually lives here in my neighborhood. And he said we'd be at the neighborhood pool during the pause, and we'd be talking about, like, how is this all going to look? How is it going to feel? And he said he told his bosses at NBC, this needs to now become a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
It is a great sporting event, but we don't have the crowd. We don't have the intensity. We're not going to get the cutaways of all the fans cheering. We're not going to be able, after a goal, to scan the crowd and see all of that and hear them. So this has to become a TV spectacle. And I thought they did an amazing job of making it visually appealing. I thought the NBA did a good job. I thought the NBA made themselves feel smaller and more intimate in a smaller arena. The NHL made it like it was a big, grand Broadway performance. At least that's how I felt. So I thought they did a great job of it, and they'll do something along those lines again. It's going to be odd during the regular season because I think they're going to try and play in home arenas. So, you know, they're going to have to figure that. They're going to have to figure out how to keep people safe and healthy.
Right.
But I think visually it'll be great.
For sure. So what we do when we have people on the first time is kind of go through their background, whether it's a player, media, the member of the media, anything like that. So kind of take us through your story growing up playing sports. You, like you mentioned, grew up on Long Island. I mean, and then take us through kind of when you first got into the media game and becoming a sports show host on so many different platforms.
Yeah, so I was 8 years old living on Long Island when the Islanders won their first of 4 straight Stanley Cups. So I was like, well, this is the greatest sport ever invented because my team wins every single year. I mean, imagine too, like back then, 16 guys won all 4 cups. So it was, you know, it was before free agency. So you knew those guys so well. They won, I think it was 19 or 21 straight playoff series. Like it was absurd.
Yeah, didn't they go to the finals the year that they stopped winning the cups?
Yeah, they lost to Edmonton.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, they lost to Edmonton. It was the drive for 5. It was one for the thumb. That's what we were all and so they won when I was 8, 9, 10, 11. And then when they lost that year, I was 8, 9, 10, 11. I was 12 years old. I was having a sleepover at my buddy Brian Silver's house. And as that game was unfolding, I think they lost in 5 games that year, maybe to Edmonton. And as it was unfolding, I was like, oh God, they're going to lose tonight. I called my parents and I was like, you got to come get me. I'm not going to be able to handle this.
And you never talked to Brian Silver again.
I blame it on him. And I cried and cried and cried. I couldn't believe that they had lost. But yeah, so I grew up on Long Island, huge Islanders fan. But the funny thing is, when I got into hockey, so I started my career in doing sports in the local news. I worked in Salisbury, Maryland. I worked in Birmingham, Alabama, which for a Jew from Long Island was a bit of a culture shock for me. I worked in Baltimore. I worked in New York. And then I got the gig with MSG Network. And I always kind of make the joke that I didn't know how little I knew about hockey until I started working in hockey. Like I was always like a big fan of hockey, but not like, and especially as my career took me to all these different places, I was so focused.
Yeah, I'm sure you weren't covering
sports.
hockey in Birmingham, Alabama.
Correct. Yes, it was not very big there. So, although it's funny because Nick Dowd grew up in Alabama, so he and I talked about Auburn more than we talked about hockey when he first came here. But so you know, when I started getting into it, I was like, man, I don't know a lot of the where guys come from. Like if you're covering the NFL and you tell me that a player played at Florida State, I have a plot line to take me through. I could walk up to that player and ask him questions just based off of his background. You know, if I knew it came down to Texas, you know, USC, Alabama, and you know, Florida State, and he went to Florida State, I got a whole background that I could talk about with this guy. When I started getting into the juniors, you know, where they played their junior hockey and, you know, the midgets and all that, and I was like, and these guys that cover the NHL and live in that world are encyclopedic about that. And if you don't know it cold, you will get called out on it. And I got called out a few times. And then it was like going to, you know, like grad school. I just worked and grinded and studied and listened and, you know, got to a point where I felt comfortable in just about any conversation. But yeah, so it was not a quick rise. It was a long, slow, steady climb. And the last 9 years at NBC Sports Washington were the best of my career, and you know, ended up covering a Stanley Cup run. So not much better than that.
Yeah, no kidding. So then the Islanders job comes around and you become the pregame host. Was the NHL always the goal, or was it more so just any professional sport since you're such a big sports fan?
Yeah, it was any professional sport. And it's funny because when you're in this business, the guy at Fox 45 in Baltimore, where I got my start as a producer, his name is Bruce Cunningham. And he said, you're never really in this business until you've been fired at least once. So I was actually working in Baltimore. I was getting married. This is August of 2009. And my boss called me in and said, go have a great wedding. Enjoy your honeymoon. In October, we're shutting down the sports department. And I was like, what? That's how you're presenting that? Like, go
he's
start
the guy
rest of your life.
says
You're going to be unemployed in 3 months.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, as I got on the shuttle, we had parked the car at BWI. I got on the shuttle to fly to Michigan. I got a call from WNBC in New York asking if I could freelance. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get married. Then I'm going to Croatia, but I'll be back in like 2 weeks. And they're like, oh my God, go have the best time. Call us when you get back. And a friend of mine who I went to college with had been working at MSG Network. She had taken another job. I reached out to her. She told me who I should email at MSG. I sent an email before I left to go get married. And when I landed in Croatia, I checked my emails and there was an email asking me to come in for an interview at MSG Network. So I got on the shuttle with staring unemployment in the face, and I got back from Croatia with 2 job offers in New York. So I ended up taking the Islanders job. And again, this is the team I grew up loving. Right. I got to work with Butch Goring, who I was actually in the arena at 9 when they won their second cup, and he won the Conn Smythe. So I got to work with a guy who, won the 4 cups. And I remember sitting at lunch one day and he's telling me stories about him and Gretzky and some of the old battles and wars. And we were there for a while and he's talking. He's like, Rob, am I boring you? I was like, Butch, I'll skip the game and sit here all night and listen to. If you told the 9-year-old me that I'd be sitting here with Butch Goring, hearing stories about trash talking Wayne Gretzky, are you kidding me? So yeah, it was pretty awesome to get that chance to be involved. And I've said this about being on the Caps broadcast, and that's how I feel about the Islanders broadcast too, is when you're a part of the pregame show, to me, there's a huge honor and responsibility because you're now a part of the fans' nightly experience. Mm-hmm. When I grew up watching the Islanders, it was Jiggs McDonald and Eddie Westfall, and Stan Fischler was in the pregame show. And those guys were just as important as Brian Trottier and Mike Bossy and John Tonelli and all those guys, because that was part of the experience. I tuned in to listen to them. Mm-hmm. And when fans say that the cup run, a lot of fans have come up and said, man, I kind of lived it through you and Alan's, love and how much fun you guys had. That means and meant the world to me because I know how important that is to the people at home watching.
Yeah, and it's an 82 game season, and like when it's the same crew for however many years, it becomes like a permanent thing in our brain. We're used to it. It's like, oh, it's 6:30. I have to turn this on now because it's Rob and Alan and GP and Johnny on the broadcast. They're going to get us ready. We know what they're going to talk about. We know the segments they're going to go through, and then we can expect an intermission. And then, like you said, too, when playoffs come around, and even when they were showing the clips of like, all right, here's how the media desk reacted when the Caps lost in overtime again, and everybody's pissed or like, what the hell's going on, man? But yeah, it just becomes fine-tuned in our brain to just expect that and know it and be like, all right, cool, we're ready for it.
It's time. Like that's the official start of the night, right? I mean, that's right. So that's
you're in your seat and you're ready by 6:30, even though the game's not starting until like 7:08.
Right, totally. And I remember, again, I've told this story a lot. I remember landing in Tampa on the Cup run, and there was like an 11-year-old kid, and I'm getting off the plane. I have my headphones in, and there's this kid standing in a Caps jersey, right at the front, and he waved, and it's like awkward. I was like, man, it looked like he was waving right at me, which is weird. I don't know that child.
Me?
Right. Then he waved again, and I totally did that. I looked back like, does he? I don't know this kid. Like, this is getting weird now. And I walked off, and I took my headphones out, and he's like, "Are you Rob Carlin?" And I was like, "I am." He's like, "Yeah, I know. I recognize you when you got on the plane. Do you mind if I take a picture?" And his mom came over and took a picture. And, it was cool. We talked for a minute, and then he walked ahead with his mom, and, she did the kind of like pull you in tight, like, how cool was that? And I like stepped up and I tapped her and I was like, hey, if you think that was cooler for him than it was for me, you're crazy. That was awesome. I was like, I was that kid. And for an 11-year-old to recognize the pregame show host, I was like, that he's a sports fan.
He's tuned in. Yeah,
he's tuned in. So I was like, yeah, it was great. It was very cool.
I have to ask, was it tough switching loyalties from the Islanders to the Capitals? Because I could never.
So the first night they played the Islanders, and this is, back in 2012 when I first started doing the Caps games. Alan May is sitting there, and I come and sit down. He hasn't said a word about this, but I did purposely wear a blue tie with a little orange in it. It was like my own little quiet homage to the team I grew up a fan of. And when you're in this business, you do kind of switch allegiances because you get to know the players, you get to know the coaches. So that fandom, while I love the Islanders in my heart, I love the Caps in my heart too. Like I've just been around so much. But at that point, the Caps were not a part of me yet. So I was like, I'll just wear a tie. No one will even recognize
like this
it.
new team. I kind of hope we smoke them a bit, dust them off.
Right.
Like,
meanwhile, the Islanders sucked back then. So there's like no chance of that. So, so the show starts and I'm like, hey, welcome in, whatever the name of the show was at that point. Caps pregame live.
Like the Comcast days, baby.
Yeah. We every year they change the name of the show. So I don't even remember what the name of the show was then. But I said, yeah, I'm, alongside Alan May, I'm Rob Carlin, Caps and Islanders tonight. John Tavares, you got to slow him down tonight. Alan, what do you think the key is? And he just goes, nice tie. And he just kept talking. I was like, that son of a bitch called me out for my tie instantly. I was like, God damn it. So yeah, he totally, so it was tough for a while. At the beginning, when the Caps would play the Islanders, I was watching the Islanders play the Caps. Midway through, and certainly in the last couple of years, there were literally nights where they were playing the Islanders. I totally forgot that it was even the Islanders. Like it was just another team, and I was so focused on the Caps and so into what they're doing that I was like, oh right, it's the Islanders. So yeah, it's I always say the playoff series for me between the Caps and the Islanders, I couldn't lose, because either my childhood team is going to advance on, or the team that makes everything better in my life advances on. So, and that cup run, I was just as happy and as proud as any lifelong Caps fan.
Right.
What year was that transition for you where it was finally watching the Caps versus the Islanders and now the Islanders versus the Caps? Like, what team was that?
That was probably around. So when I first was doing the Caps, I was, I was part of the Caps broadcast in 2012. I was brought here to be part of the Caps broadcast. But I also did our nightly news shows. I was on the Redskins beat during the RG3 years. So it was always like sort of split time. Then Sports Talk Live came up with B-Mitch, and I did that and the Caps. I started full time on the Caps, but that was the only gig in 2018 for the Cup run. The 2017-18 season. It was the first year where it was only me, but I had established myself. So I would say it was probably around the 16-17 season. So it was a couple of years in, but not hardcore Caps years.
Yeah.
But right around then, I'd been doing it for so long that,
the depression really started to hit you that we all felt every year.
Correct. Yes.
Was that the Shattenkirk year? That was the Shattenkirk year.
That was the Shattenkirk year. Yes. And I thought they're going to win the cup this year.
Yep.
And then I was like, oh, I get why all these Caps fans are like this now. Because I thought slam dunk, this is a cup year, and they lost again.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that was it. And really what happened was, again, this goes back to being in this business. The guys on the Islanders that I covered were like Kyle Oposo, I think, had left at that point. Tavares was still there, but like slowly the guys that Andy McDonald had left, like guys that were there.
Wisnowski.
They were transitioning into a new team. Yeah. So like my allegiance wasn't to the guys that I got to know a little bit anymore.
Right. So you work actually building off that. I mean, you spent close to like 10 years at Comcast Sportsman at NBC Washington. Obviously, covering more than just the Caps. So I'm sure you've got a ton of memories from your time there. We want to get into some of that. So what's your favorite Caps memory, specific game or anything like that?
The cup. I mean, it's not even.
It's not even
It's
close
not even
to
close.
anybody.
I mean, it's.
Well, besides the cup,
Seems
outside
fair.
the cup, what do you have?
When you say besides the cup, is that anything on the cup run or
Sure. Yeah, we'll include the cup run.
the cup run? I think everyone's favorite moment was Kuzi knocking out the
Pittsburgh.
Penguins. Yeah, I mean that was, you
Mhm.
know, and they had the video of me doing the bird because they turned the camera right because I didn't know the goal went in until I saw him do that. Alan immediately jumped up on the stage. He knew it went in. I was kind of looking. I was like, what just happened? And I looked at Alan and I looked back down and I saw him doing the bird. I was like, oh my God. They just knocked out Pittsburgh. So that was incredible. And the funny thing was, so we were like in the stands. We were at the top of the first section of stands. That's where we did our show from. So they knock them out. Boom. We're sitting down, putting IFBs in, getting ready to do the show. And all these Penguins fans, and I am literally right on the edge. So they're filing out 1.5 feet away from me. And we're getting ready. We got our microphones, you know, NBC Sports Washington. And they're all just like, F you, go back to DC. And of course, I have Alan with me. So I'm like, bye-bye now. So
Talk shit to
long.
him. Yeah.
Take care
Stand
now.
behind
See
him.
ya. I definitely had like, I was
You had your
a little
muscle.
tough because I had Alan sitting next to me.
Yeah, you had the
Yeah.
muscle.
Yeah.
No kidding. I would have been screaming at these guys.
It was tough not to, man, because they were just being so. I was like, and it was like one of those moments where I was like, dude, you just won back-to-back cups. Like, what more do you want?
And
you
we
know?
never
like,
beat you, so chill out.
chill out for a second.
Let us
But
get one.
yeah, it was extra sweet to see them filing out so down, like they were just angry and pissed off. And I was like, oh, I know this. I've seen Caps fans like this a lot. Like, so long
Deja
now.
vu.
There are definitely times when I think I hate Pittsburgh more than I actually like the Caps. I don't know if that's bad or not, but that's just how I feel sometimes. But that's just
a lifetime of being kicked in the midsection.
Yep.
By the same team.
Lower than the midsection.
Right. Yes. Over and over again. Yes. I get that.
Kind of staying on the topic, which is your favorite Caps team besides that Cup team?
Yeah, I've had good teams.
When did they have the best chance to win the Cup when they didn't, do you think?
I think it was the year before.
Yeah.
I think it was the year before. I thought that team really had a chance. I thought, man, this team is so loaded and so good. And I, you know, it's something that'll never be proven, but I do believe had they beaten Pittsburgh, they would have won that cup.
Yeah.
I think they were the second best team in hockey. And, you know, they never got that year where all the guys chipped in.
Yeah.
In 18, they finally got everyone doing something. That's what we said. Everyone, every night had to have an effect on the game in one way, shape, or form. And in 18, they did. But that year before, I thought they're better than Pittsburgh this year. They're just better.
Yeah.
And that was the year I was so stunned.
They outplayed them too that entire series, and they just ended up losing it. Yeah.
And that's why you get that feeling of hating Pittsburgh, because you're like, I don't understand. They've played better. How did they lose this game? It was like 3 goals in 5 minutes by Pittsburgh and blows 55 great minutes.
Yep.
And and I'm telling you, man, when they came back for that year that they won the cup, that you walked into the room in training camp and you were like, oh, this room's broken. They are not over that loss. Like, you felt it. You felt it like early on that they were not, you know, we all know. I mean, Trotz almost got fired a couple of times. That team was broken.
We had Joe B on, and he told us, like, dude, there was multiple times where Trotz would come up to me on the plane and being like, I don't think they're going to let me on this plane tonight. I really don't.
I was going to bring up the Joe B interview too. He actually said his answer was, we asked the same question. It was the 13-14 team, which I thought was interesting because usually people say that 16-17 team was the best team. And on paper, they were unbelievable, especially after that Shattenkirk trade. You think, oh, let's go. This is it. And it just didn't happen.
Well, I think I remember that 13-14 season, if I remember correctly, Carl Alsner, when they got eliminated, because at that point, Alsner was still part of that core of failed expectations.
Yep.
And he was great because he was always going to talk to the media. So you'd always get something from him. And I remember him saying after they lost, and it's one of those simple statements, but you knew when he said it, what he meant. He was like, we're never going to be that team until we're finally that team. And I was like, yeah, man, there's only so many years where people say, oh, the Caps are great. The Caps are a Stanley Cup contender. If you lose year after year after year in the second round, we're not even talking about getting to the Eastern Conference final.
Right.
So I do remember him saying that. And I was like, oh no, they're going to have to blow this up now. Like these guys are starting to realize this is too many years of falling miserably short.
Yeah.
Not losing in game 6 in the cup, not losing in overtime in game 7 in the Eastern Conference final. They're in the second round and they can't get out. Something's wrong. And I do remember, Joe B is right. That team was really good. And that right around that generation, that 13, 14, 15 year, which is a whole other thing. But that's when you started going like, okay, something more has to change. They can't just keep bringing in these parts around the edges. And that's when like,
that's when the trade Ovi rumors started to fly between.
Right. At least amongst. Right. But if you remember back then, because I remember talking with Chuck Gormley, who was our insider back then. And Chuck was wired in. And Chuck was not afraid to ask a tough question. So sometimes in our business, especially when you're a broadcast partner, certain subjects you kind of have to gloss over. He was not afraid. And I remember having a conversation with him where he said to me, there's people in the organization that want to trade him.
That's crazy.
And it was just like, and I always said, well, if you're gonna do something like that, if you're gonna take the TNT and blow it up, trade Backstrom, because at that point, Backstrom was so widely respected, you could have gotten 7 players or 3 players and 4 draft picks.
Right.
Then you're setting the whole team up for a new course. But I was like, hey, you can't be the guy that traded Ovi. You're never going to get back. But he felt, at least within the organization, there was a growing feeling of maybe that's the right thing to do. Now, no one will ever admit that publicly, and I don't know who.
Not now, especially no.
Right,
definitely not.
Right, but there was like, again, how many times can you fail miserably before you go, okay, we got to just blow this whole thing up?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the 2017 Caps you talked about. Now, you obviously don't know this firsthand, but do you think that's how Tampa Bay felt this year after being swept by Columbus last year? You think they were just broken?
For sure. They said that. I had Jeff Halpern on one of the episodes of the Capitol Building podcast, and he was actually funny. He was like, all offseason, we kept saying, don't talk about the series. Do not talk about the series. We have to move on. Do not talk about it. And he was like, literally every single day we brought it up. We could not avoid it.
We're bringing it up, saying not to talk about it, but we're bringing it up.
Right. And he said like every day something would come up about that series. Hey, forget what we did. Damn it. Did it again. Like he just said, we could not avoid it.
Remember
and he
John
said,
Tortorella?
Right. He said like that first month, and they started off slow, like the Caps, and he said they were still carrying that heavily. And I think what the Caps did in that 2018 Stanley Cup playoffs and what Tampa did in this year's playoffs was the same thing. They finally got to a point and they said, enough. We're playing the game the right way. We've tried this 1,000 times, being cute and firing shots from the outside and relying on our talent. That stops now. I will sacrifice anything. And I heard a story that on that Caps Cup run, that after they beat Columbus in the first round, one of their leaders got on the plane and someone said to him, we got Pittsburgh again. And that guy said, and I won't say who the player was because it was told to me in confidence, but I will tell you this. He said, we're beating Pittsburgh and we're winning the whole thing this year. and the person who told me that was like, I had never heard anyone say that. It was like one of those moments, like when oh God, what's Rocky's why am I blanking now? When she was like, win, you know what you have to do?
Right.
Win. Like all of a sudden the
Gotta
music
win.
changed and that guy was like, oh my God, we're going to win the Stanley Cup. And that was after Columbus. That was before Pittsburgh. And I think Tampa dude, the moves they made to get tougher during the season were fantastic.
Yep.
And I just think they were like, we're not doing this again.
Right.
We're going to play the game the right way.
So speaking about stories that you were just talking about, I have to ask if you have a personal favorite OV story, like one that not many would know since you were kind of around him more than most people get to be.
You know, it's funny because the OV story that probably jumps out to me the most is such like a kind of a throwaway thing. But to me, it was like, wow, this dude just gets it. So I got a chance this past season to do a ride along with him for
right.
Yeah, the Papa John's delivery. Yeah. And I got to drive in his car with him and he's delivering pizzas and whatever. So first he goes to a hospital and he spends a ton of time with the kids. A ton. Took every picture, signed every autograph, went and spent time with the nurses, answered questions, took more pictures. And I was like, wow, they're really like getting every ounce of Ovi here. Then we get in his car and we drive to a fire station and we're literally getting off the exit. We make a right-hand turn. The fire station is right there. And as we're at the red light, waiting to make the right-hand turn, fire station is 30 yards down the road. We hear the alarm go off. And I was like, and I looked at Ovi and he's like, is that the fire alarm? I was like, I think that's the fire alarm. And there go the trucks. And we were like, oh no, we're delivering pizzas to the firemen. They all just left in a fire. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening right now. And we pull in and we had to wait for like the rest of the crew. The cameraman was coming, the Papa John's people, the marketing people. So they come pulling up and me and Ovi are standing in the parking lot. What are we doing? There's no one here. There's like 2 firefighters in there.
Pizza's here.
Right. That's what he kept saying. Yes. And so a guy pulled his car in and like literally like pulls in and you can see him like, that Alex Ovechkin like standing in the parking lot here. And so Ovi's like, get your camera. And we get the camera and he walks over and he hands a pizza to the guy sitting in his car. This guy's like, okay, thanks. Are you Ovi? And he's like, yeah, pizza's here. And so he gave him that great moment. We go inside the fire station. He gives his pizza to and he rings the doorbell at the fire station. And same thing. They're like, who is it? And he's like, pizza's here. Does the whole thing every time, cracking himself up. We go inside. They let him get in the fire truck. He's playing with the lights and the horns like a child and giggling.
As expected, yeah.
Yeah, I figured.
And he does all that. And then so now we've survived, right? We got at least delivered a couple of pizzas to a couple of firefighters. Then we have to drive to a neighborhood to like surprise someone. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but I don't know if we got the address wrong or something. So we were like, let's just ring the doorbell at a house here. And you could see people looking out because it's a convoy of cars coming and Ovi's G-Wagon. And then Ovi's just standing in the middle of the street and you could see people looking out. And he went up, rang the doorbell, took a picture with all these people. And then he split. And I was just like, this dude has been doing this for 15 years and he still does it. He's still doing the Papa John's delivery. He gave the firefighters something to remember. He gave that family something to remember. He gave a hospital full of employees and sick children something to remember. And he did it with a smile on his face the entire time. And I was just like, you know what? You could say anything you want about Ovi. Dude's all right in my book. Right. And then we went back to MedStar, formerly Kettler, and he surprised the hockey team and capped off the night with a bunch of kids and they were losing their freaking minds. There was 30 hockey players climbing all over each other to get pictures with him. And he stood there and took a picture with every kid. I was like, dude gets it, man.
And he's as goofy as he was when he was doing it at 18 when he first got here.
Right.
So getting into the current stuff a bit, I mean, we'll kind of bunch this in the bubble performance and the offseason, because obviously there has been quite a shift in the landscape here. over this offseason, obviously. So I want to talk about these two big departures. One, the first being Braden Holtby, and the second one, obviously, being head coach Todd Reardon. Kind of give us your perspective on Holtby first, the whole situation. I mean, obviously, we couldn't keep him. We knew that. But I think a lot of people were surprised to see how cheap he actually signed for, knowing he was going for that big ticket out in the market. I think he was going for ticket and term. He gets 2 years in Vancouver at that $4.5 million. And how good of a fit do you think he'll be there? And it's kind of in a 1-2 system as well there, that 1A, 1B situation you got to imagine.
Yeah, that surprised me more than anything, that he went someplace that he wasn't the clear number one. Like had he gone to Edmonton, that's his job, and he's playing with Connor McDavid and, you know, a really talented team that's probably a really good goalie away from being a pretty solid contender. To go really be a battle for the starter. Now, they've said he's the starter coming in from day one, but Demko is going to have something to say about that.
Right.
So he's going to be part mentor, part starter. And so that surprised me. I mean, the worst possible timing for him as far as the term and money. I mean, it's just the worst possible time. It started with, you know, Bob getting all that
Screwing
money,
everybody over.
Just totally screwing the pooch for every goalie after that. So, you know, as Bob's season was playing out, we were like, Holtby wants to strangle him right now. Meanwhile, Holtby's not doing anything to help his own cause.
No. Yeah.
So he didn't play particularly well. And then, but look, he said he wanted to go someplace that he wanted to live, and he felt he had a chance to win. And Vancouver checked both of those boxes. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Vancouver. Ben, you may.
Never.
Ben,
I want to go though.
Oh my God, it's one of the most gorgeous places on earth.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. And so he, you know, picked a great city, picked a great up and coming young team with a ton of young stars.
It's his boy Nate Schmidt.
Gets his boy Nate Schmidt. Biggs is there. Yeah. So I think it's a good fit for him. You know, his great grandkids will probably be upset that maybe the money will run out before, you know, it would have had he signed. If he was a free agent 2 years ago, it would have been a 7.
They're backing a bank truck up to his door.
Right. It would have been 7 by 9.5 or 9.5 by 7, you know, but that's the way it is. And look, he's got to prove now that he's what he's got left in the tank. So he's, you know, I think it was time here.
Yeah, it was.
It was time. I mean, Samsonov makes it more pressing, but I think everyone was ready to move in a different direction.
Right. And then kind of flipping over to Uncle Todd there. I mean, do you think that writing was kind of on the wall from the beginning? I mean, give us your thoughts.
Did Joe B say how many times Todd said they wouldn't let him on the plane? Because I would imagine there was a few times Todd would have said that too.
Well, okay. Well, we will admit
listening to Chirp and DMV.
Because we will admit we were never the biggest Todd fans. We can say that truthfully. I mean, if people go back and listen, you know that we had some hot takes about Todd. But I mean, give us your thoughts on why that firing, you know, was, or maybe in your perspective, it wasn't a good idea. I mean,
no, it was definitely a good idea, and I like Todd a lot. But and I said this, I actually recorded a mailbag podcast and for Thanksgiving week here. And I quoted Chris Miller, my longtime buddy at NBC Sports Washington. He used to say this all the time, usually about the Wizards, but the milk went bad. Something stunk about that team. He had lost the room.
I don't think he ever got the room, to be honest.
No, that's not true.
Well,
the reason Barry Trotz left was because the team wanted Todd Reardon.
Yeah, they were grooming him and all this quote unquote stuff. I get that, but I don't know. I feel
like. Do you think he just was a better assistant coach because he could relate to the players more, and then as a head coach, he kind of had to stop being the buddy?
He was the good cop, and then he had to turn into the bad cop.
Yeah, exactly.
All those things could be true. I don't know why. I don't know why. Well, he's a good coach.
Right. You don't get to where you are by not being a great coach.
Right. And I think he'll be a good head coach somewhere down the line. I think going back to Pittsburgh is a great move for him.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Well, first off, I was gonna ask you, like, what did you think his biggest flaw was, like, while he was here? But I was also wanted to roll in. He goes into Pittsburgh as the power play coach and defensive coach, I think, right? and those were our worst two aspects of our game. Pittsburgh, I bet it's going to go through the roof now because he's the assistant coach.
Well, the crazy thing is that, I mean, he was the defense whisperer, right? I mean, he gets Michael Kempney. He makes him a top pair defenseman when he couldn't crack a horrendous Chicago lineup.
Yeah.
Makes John Carlson a Norris Trophy. Yeah.
A Norris Trophy snub.
Right. I mean, so, you can't deny that he was a great defensive coach. He was the defensive specialist on those teams. Like I said, I don't know why it went wrong, man. It just did. He lost the room relatively quickly. But keep in mind, and I say this with every ounce of respect for this core, because once you win a Stanley Cup, it erases everything else, and everything else becomes far less relevant. They've chewed through a lot of coaches.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of coaches who they either chose or they wanted or felt comfortable with, and it quickly fell out of favor. So there is something to this group that, they're sort of like a Peter Laviolette, like they have a lot of success and a lot of failure. Now their failure is relative because they're still a great team. I'm talking playoff failure. So they go through these coaches with, and that's what I mean. I can see your face where you're like, I don't know about failure.
It's there. It's there. It's the highs are high and the lows are low.
The lows are low for this
very
team.
Low.
And then all of a sudden, a coach is wondering if he can get on the plane again. So there's something fundamental with this core group that they've chewed through a lot of coaches.
My thing with Todd was like, I mean, and this is just my personal opinion. You can tell me if I'm wrong or not. It just felt like he was really, really slow to make any type of change.
A little
Adjustments.
Yeah, a little stubborn.
Babcock-esque.
Yeah.
He definitely felt at times like he was the smartest guy in the room all the time. So when you feel that way, you tend to think, I'll coach my way out of this. And I could see where when you go, hey, 8, 19, and 77, you ready? Like I always say, coaches can be geniuses when they've got players. Well, I'll put my money on these guys. They'll figure it out. So, when you've got, a Vezina winning goalie, what you think is a Norris winning defenseman, the greatest goal scorer of our generation, the most underrated center of our generation, one of the hardest nosed players of this current crop of teams. You got a budding 30-goal scorer in Jacob Vrana. You've got a dazzling Evgeny Kuznetsov that's going to drive you freaking batty and cost coaches jobs.
Yep.
Like you got a lot of talent you're dealing with there. So I could see where you just go, I mean, their fourth line was unproductive, but really good at what they do.
Yep.
So like, I could see where you might get stubborn, but I'm kind of surprised that the assistant coaches have stayed around as long as they have. And maybe there was something that could have been done about that. But then again, a head coach has to be allowed to do something like that. And if you're not allowed to, well, that's a whole other can of worms.
Gotcha.
So speaking of coaches, what are your thoughts on Peter Laviolette taking over? Do you think he's a guy? Because I do. I think he's a guy who can get through to a veteran group like the Caps. He seems like pretty hard-nosed, will get in anyone's face if he has to.
History says they could win a cup in the next 2 years before he gets fired, right?
Exactly.
I mean, this dude, I've never seen a more consistent DNA.
Yeah.
He makes a completely irrelevant Islanders team very relevant.
Yep.
He takes the Flyers to the cup. He takes the Predators to the cup, and then gets canned real quick. So yeah, I mean, if he can't get that team to a Stanley Cup in the next 2 years, the window's probably closed at that point, and maybe you're looking at a coach who's going to be more long-term after that. But I thought it was a great hire, and for the first time, so Trotz, they got a guy who'd been around for a long time, but they got a guy from like this very safe spot in Barry Trotz. This is a little bit more of like, okay, we're going to see if this
works,
quote unquote, coaching genius can win us a cup here. Like this was we're going to swing for the fences. Trotz, I think, was more of a safer, we need someone who knows what they're doing to build chemistry, to build culture. This feels like, we're going to rock the culture to its core and see what these guys are made of. And if along the way we could win a cup or two.
Did you like the Babcock rumors?
I like the rumors.
I like the fact that they were only rumors.
Right. I like that it was something to talk about.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone thought that was going to be the right move.
Love it. Love it. So we'll kind of start to wrap it up a little bit here. So we'll ask some kind of different questions. So I'm a former PR guy. I've worked so I like to hear like media people's perspective on that side of things. So I spent some time with the UFC, the Redskins, West Virginia sports. And the biggest thing to me is always.
Whoa. You spent time with the Redskins?
I did. I was there in 2000. I worked a season there in the PR department in 2015, I believe it was.
So was that with Tony Wiley?
Yeah, Tony Wiley. Worked under Tony Wiley. Yep.
Wow.
Worked under Tony.
Man, you have seen the craziest of the crazy then. Not Tony. Tony's a good dude.
No, but I was
in general.
Yeah, I was there during the prime, I guess, things going wrong years and getting a good view of that because I came from the UFC and went to Skins there to kind of bring myself back to the East Coast, and it was
which is more of a crazy show.
This is crazy. But so what I'm getting to is press boxes, and I'm sure you spent a lot of time in various press boxes, and one press box I've never been in is Capital One Arena. So I need to know, give me a good rating here of the press box. How's the food? Is the food
not great
there? Okay.
Not great. No, it's
there
snacks up top. You get your food down below, and the food's all right. It's all right. Then you go upstairs, and it's just like a bowl of like pretzels or something, and like a bowl of candy, and then some popcorn. It's a very I'm not a huge fan. I didn't spend a lot of time up there.
I figured you did, and that's why I kind of was wondering if you spent, because I know you guys don't spend, or at least you don't spend much time up there, because I wouldn't want to spend much time near Tarek anyway. Tarek's our guy. We love him to death, but I'm sure he probably is like taking the best seat in the house, not letting anybody come near. And
correct. I'll stop you when you're wrong about Tarek.
See, that's what we do though. I mentioned the question earlier with our first guest. See, and then we rope you into coming on multiple times because Tarek's been on like 4 or 5 times now. Yeah. So now you're stuck, like you're roped in now.
Yep. Wow. Well, how far into this? And then when you drop that nugget on me, okay,
you're roped in now.
Now I'm in. Okay.
But yeah,
now it's like Bronx Tale. I feel like you just shut the door and lock it. Like now you just can't leave.
Yep.
You work for us now. Thanks. AB.
So, which Capitals player that you've dealt with over your time has been the best to kind of interact with from a media standpoint for you? Who was always available and like polite to the media, I guess?
Funny thing is, Matt Niskanen, who is a tough, like he's sort of an ornery guy, always there. Yeah. Door opens, Matt Niskanen was always there to answer questions. Tom Wilson is great, and Tom Wilson's great because he'll also talk to you about like baseball or movies, or like he's just like a dude who wants to just kind of hang out for a while. Like he'll answer all your questions, he'll give you great answers, and then he'll just kind of stand and talk for a while. Like he's a good dude. Oshie's the kind of guy that you want to like punch in the face because you're like, wait a second. So you're good at every sport. You're like a world-class athlete, great golfer, shoots hoops, like got this amazing family at home, beautiful wife. Like really, is anything your nickname is Captain America? Like really, is anything?
Just good at everything and you hate him for it. Yeah.
Right. But he is seriously like one of those like, girls want to be with him and guys want to, be him. Like, yeah. He's a really good guy. I will say that hockey players in general are amongst the best professional athletes. You're dealing with some guys from foreign countries that English isn't their first language, so they'll tend to be quiet and you can't get to them a little bit.
Yeah.
But all of them are really pretty much solid guys across the board.
Yeah.
And you don't have to name any names, but any bad apples, any tough ones to work with? Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I have some ideas. But actually, I'm trying to think if he was on the roster when you got here in 2012.
I'm actually in the dark here. I don't know who you're talking about.
Okay, Rob didn't hear this.
We'll say it. We'll say it after.
We'll say it after. But all right, cool. So yeah, I figured. But that's always what we've gotten. Like even Joe B coming from that standpoint. He's like, I've worked in many sports, this, that, and the other. But like, you don't have to worry about hockey players. It's just you're gonna get good stuff out of them, and you're gonna get it each time. So. Ben's question here, unfortunately, it looks like you had some internet issues, but you had a super unique relationship with Alan May. We brought him up a couple times. And obviously your last broadcast, by the most unfortunate standards, obviously it was a super special moment between the two of you, saying his goodbyes and everything. Maybe discuss that relationship a little bit and just kind of touch on what it was like to work with him, and not even work with him, but become friends with him on a personal standpoint.
Yeah, he's as good as it gets, man. I really, sometimes he could be tough to deal with because, former professional athletes just can be at times. But he's the type of guy that would lay down in traffic for you. If you're in his circle, you're kind of there, and he'll do anything he can for you. He always took interest in my wife and my kids, always asked about them. When my kids were born, God, he called and texted, and, they were born on a game night, and he was like, I called. I was like, I don't know what's going on. My wife just went, to the hospital. I think he said, go, man, go. It's be the greatest day of your life. Like, he's a really tough guy who's also like genuine to the heart, a good guy that wants nothing but good things for his friends. And, that last show, and I figured, that was tough for me. That was tough because I found out the day that we were coming back on August 3rd,
right,
that they weren't going to renew me, and they gave me the option not to do the show that night. And I said, let me call you back. And I called back. I said, look, those are my shows. I want to take this. If you're willing to let me work, I'd like to finish the season out. And so and then Alan's not there. He's in his house. So it was kind of, the whole thing was disjointed, but it was like a long, slow death march for me. Like every game I was like, is tonight going to be like when the Caps won their game, I was almost like, I got to do this again. Like you kind of get to a place. And when they lost, I was, for me personally, I was glad they lost. I couldn't do it anymore. It was weighing heavy. And I knew that last show I'd have my time to say goodbye, and my time to, say goodbye to Alan and thank him. But I did not expect it to be the first thing. And when he started talking, I'm already fighting back the tears. And he started talking, man, and I was just like,
nope, gotta let it go. Gotta let it go.
I'm not gonna make it. And I could see from where I'm sitting, I could see through to the booth, the producer and the director, and we had a lot of bosses in, and I see people start scurrying. And I was like, oh, they're not liking this. They are not liking that this show has become about
don't
me.
You dare come in here.
And I was just like, well, I got to let him say his piece. And he did. And it was just, again, we had a really great relationship. We had a really good thing going. Fans seemed to dig it.
Yeah. And
I really loved working with him. He made me better at understanding hockey. I think I made him better at TV. And I think it, all of it worked. And another funny little story of a thing he did, my very first broadcast. And I told the story on the last night. So, you may have heard this, but on the last night, he's like, don't tell this story. I was like, what do I care now? Right? This is my last night anyway. They can't fire me. So I had just met him like once or twice briefly. And it's our first night together. And they're counting us down, and they're like 5, 4. And I see him frantically scribbling something on a piece of paper. And they're like 3. And I'm nervous. I'm in a new station, my first time on air. And he slides the piece of paper over, and it just says, "Are you a Jew?" And I looked at him. I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he just gave me this look like, I knew it. And I was just like, what? And they're like, go. And I was like, what? And I was a little flustered right off the bat. And he was cracking up. He was so
it's too funny.
He thought he was the funniest guy on earth at that moment. And I was just like, okay, well, this is going to be a hell of a ride with this dude. And it was, man. We had so much fun together. We laughed so much. And you know what? We fought a number of times. We yelled at each other a number of times. Like all the stuff that happens when you're working with someone really closely for a long time. Like we had times where we MF'd each other up and down and whatever. We screamed at each other, all part of it. And
it's healthy.
And being on the cup run together was like, we all experienced this incredible thing together. So it was, I'm going to miss working with that dude tremendously.
Sure.
Tremendous.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes sometimes the back and forth is, you know, like I said, it helps a lot because I mean, we got this idiot Ben up in Canada with terrible Wi-Fi, clearly.
Yeah, you deal with that.
Snowstorm, if you can believe it.
So you now only get one last question, Ben. That's your punishment.
Okay. My last question, Rob, I was going to ask, we all know how the Capitals partied when they won the cup. I was wondering if you guys in the broadcast department did anything as crazy as they did to celebrate the cup.
Not as crazy as they did, but hell yes. That was a long night. And remember the Kevin Durant when he said, "Mom, you're the real MVP."
Yep.
My wife is the real MVP because after that long night in Vegas, and you could see right back there, that picture, that's me holding the cup at about 4:00 in the morning up on the wall. And in the club in Vegas. And so we drank until about 4:00 in the morning. And so that's 7:00 back home. And I call my wife, I get back to the hotel. I literally jammed stuff in my suitcase. We had like a 7:30.
Yeah, you guys were up and at them early.
Yeah. So I literally just rolled all my stuff, packed it into my bag, called my wife. I was like, I haven't gone to sleep. I got to go, catch a plane. We're going to fly. This is crazy. This is great. It's not, I'm drunk.
Hold on.
I'm like, this is the greatest night of my life. This is so much fun.
It's like me every weekend.
It was amazing. And what did she do? Some wives would get pissed that their husband's flying back drunk from Vegas after the cup.
Oh, come on.
She takes my daughters to an amusement park, a water park in Northern Virginia, and spends the night. So I get home from this insane night of partying in Vegas, somewhere over Chicago. I was like, oh, I'm hungover now. I feel like death. I'm like green. I'm sweating. And I got home.
Barkart?
Right. I got home and my wife, the house is empty. I just sprawled out across my bed and slept for like a day. Okay. And then everywhere I went in my neighborhood, everyone was like, dude, how was it? Here's a beer. So I just remember. I know. The details get a little sketchy.
Yeah.
No kidding.
So you'd say that right there is probably your exact favorite moment from that cup run.
Everything I just said.
Yep.
Everything I just said.
That's funny because we asked, like, obviously, I think Tark's was during the Tampa series when they won Game 7, and then you guys went to dinner. Maybe you're with him, maybe you won't. And then Joe B just keeps ordering red wine after red wine, like 200 bottle, and he's being all like, "Do you guys smell it?" And Tark's just like taking it down like shooters.
So Tarek told you about the Joe B wine experience.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so I don't know if he told you this. We went to Locker's holiday party one year, and at that party, Joe B, it's like a wine presentation. He's got bottles, and this one comes from, and me and Courtney Lachlan were just standing there like, less talky, more pourry. And he'd pour you like that little bit to like get the taste. And I was like, hey, right up to the top, my man, right up to the top. And he's like, well, I want you to enjoy it. I was like, I'll enjoy it right up to the top.
I didn't say when yet.
I didn't say when.
I'll enjoy it once I have about 6 or 7 of them.
Correct.
And we really kick this party off.
I can't. My taste buds were numbed 45 minutes ago. I just want more wine.
So you think I care about the taste of this stuff?
I was like, he's like, this one was in my private stock I was like, Joe, I love you, man. I don't. So then then was totally like me and Tarek being like, all right, you cause a diversion that way. I'm grabbing that bottle right there and let's get the hell out. Yeah. Like this is mayhem, just mayhem.
All right. So we'll end it with this. What's next for Rob Carlin?
I wish I had a great answer for you that I'll be replacing Doc on the play-by-play of NBC Sports. You got
to fist fight Joe B for that one. You got to fist fight Joe B for that one.
Yeah.
Breaking news. We'll break that news on here.
Yeah. No, I think Joe B would kill me before let me take that job before him and not even feel bad about it. No, I don't know what happened to Rob. I just stopped texting. I don't know right now. Searching. This is a tough time to be looking. Hoping to stay in the business, but the business is changing drastically.
It changes every day.
Yeah. And so I've got feelers out to a number of places. I'm also, if I end up going in a different direction and going out working in the real world that we in TV call it, I could look back and say I had a hell of a run, 25 years, covered a couple of Super Bowls, was the face and voice of a Stanley Cup run, and was part of fans' experience with the Islanders and with the Caps. And, I could hold my head high. I have a lot of friends that left this business a long time ago.
Yeah.
And if I could say I got, almost 25 years in the business and did what I got to do, I will consider myself very lucky. And then one of my daughters asked me, what job would you want? And I was like, well, baby, I had the job I wanted. And she was like, so what are you going to do at your next job? I was like, well, I might just have a job. So I had a job I loved for a long time. So.
Go to work and make my paycheck. But I think we can all agree with you I think we can all say that we were lucky to have you for the past so many years. Because like you said, you become the face of something. You become a switch in all of our brains where it's like, we know to turn on at 6:30 to get you and Alan and all them from 6:30 to 7. We know we got Joe B and Craig doing Joe's little classic little whatever poem he puts together to start the game. And then we get you at intermission in the post-game show. And I mean, I personally enjoyed it for years. I thought you and Alan were great together, and Johnson and GP and them.
You may not have known us, but we got to know you very well, and it was awesome. And you got full support from us. Obviously, we're rooting for the best for you, man.
The Islanders lost John Tavares, but they gave away Rob Carlin.
Let's go.
I mean, what a way to end this. I was about to get all emotional, and then that comes up. You know what, guys? This was fun. I'm going to go crawl up in my Caps blanket and pillowcases like Tavares and his Toronto ones.
Yeah. Love it. Well,
I appreciate the kind words. It was a lot of fans reach out to me. I was overwhelmed. My wife has said many times, she's like, I've never seen someone get all positive on social media. It's the meanest place on earth.
Yeah.
And really, it was overwhelmingly positive. And I partied for days after the Cup, and I cried for days after they let me go. But hell of a run, man. Hell of a run.
Like I said earlier, the highs and lows of it. But Rob Carlin, we greatly appreciate you coming on. You're welcome on anytime, whether it's the podcast, whether it's one of our live shows, pregame, postgame. We'd love to have you.
We could go part 2. Honestly, I could still talk to you for like 3 more hours, dude.
But we appreciate you coming on.
Well, apparently I have to come back now.
You have to.
Yeah,
you have to.
I'll DM you. I'll DM you this time and not leave you hanging.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Let's do a duo interview with Tarek and Rob Carlin at the same time.
Ooh, perfect. It could get dangerous.
Anytime, guys. Anytime. Let me know.
Bar down. Off the bar. Bar down. Cross bar and down. Off the bar and down.